I'll start free to hand out a piece of paper with 2 squares in it. While I'm talking, I would really like you just to do some just little doodles in there. Not doodles, little patterns. So don't overthink it, just relax and just do 2 little patterns of your choice in each square. And you'll find out why I've asked you to do this at the end. So, as we mentioned, going to a counsellor can be scary. Have you ever thought of seeing a counsellor and then thought, yeah, nah? And the reason that it's scary for people is that our current modalities are based on old, non-Australian methodologies. So you've all heard of Sigmund Freud. So he was an Austrian fellow, and one of his huge, most famous ideas is he believed that people have an unconscious desire to marry their mothers. I'm not going there. Abraham Maslow had Russian heritage. He developed his famous hierarchy of needs, and the first ones he realised is that we need food, water, shelter, clothes, and reproduction. Aaron Beck, Ukrainian heritage, he developed the CBT, or cognitive behaviour therapy, that's really popular now, and that recognises that we have automatic thoughts, and they fall into 3 different categories: negative ideas about oneself, the world, and the future. So as I mentioned, these are all based on people that have long gone, and is it relevant to how we are as a society, to our lifestyles now, and our views as Australian people. So with this kind of start, modern day counselling and psychiatry sessions are not considered warm and fuzzy. It's not something that people line up to do, and because of this, people are not looking after their own well-being, whether it's physical or emotional. So most practitioners are in a clinical room, small room. Quite often they don't have a window, you're facing the person. It can be a bit awkward, you feel like you're under scrutiny. And quite often the first consultation is just purely documenting your details. So if you're busting to talk about something, it's not very satisfying because you've then got to wait for the next session to do that. I have been in that position as a client, and I never went back for the second session. And certainly no more sessions and no referrals for that practitioner either. So let me tell you some facts about First Nations people that you might not know. The majority of our communication is unspoken. So we're really aware of body languages and all the nuances of facial features and micro-expressions and that kind of stuff. So then, how do you have a counselling session with someone when communication is majority unspoken? Our identity is actually tied up in which part of the country soothes our soul and our sense of belonging. We're really connected to nature, and I'll give you a really amazing experience on how that works towards the end of this. We're also really tuned into the energy of the environment and people around us, as you are. Have you ever walked into a room and felt something was a bit off? Or on the other hand, you've walked into a room and it's buzzing, but there's no obvious reason for that. So that's a really good example of how we all pick up on this kind of energy. And it's really important to how we function, because that's also part of our coping strategies, is being aware of that kind of thing. First Nations people are also very spiritual and strongly believe in the spirit world. This might sound a bit like gobbledygook, but remember that Christianity and other religions around the world recognise there's a spirit world, such as angels, demons. All Indigenous cultures have stories about their own mythical creatures, such as fairies, leprechauns, mermaids, that sort of stuff. So there's an absolute recognition that there's something else apart from us. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So modern day counselling doesn't take this into consideration. It doesn't account for our spiritual connection that we need to other people, to nature, and the world around us. So I'm mentioning these things to show that there is so much more to our senses and being on this planet, and that really needs to be taken into account when we're working therapeutically with somebody. I'd like to change the way that counselling is provided for people, especially at the first consultation. No more reliving your trauma to strangers at the first meeting. By using art to tell your story, It's a softer, more effective technique for a client. It builds a strong rapport for the parties so that the healing journey is more pleasurable and self-directed journey. And the counsellor is there to support you on your journey. Rather sitting face to face, let me sit beside you and support you on the journey. My counselling methodologies incorporate the amazing elements of nature and our personal senses. My counselling therapy use all of the things I've mentioned. I use art so that your subconscious can tell me and yourself what's going on with you and what you need to work on. I use nature to create a nurturing environment. When I bought my house, I spent big biggies putting in a freshwater billabong in my backyard. It's my swimming pool, it's got fish, water lilies, it has a waterfall, it's all filtered through plants and gravel, and the water that comes off the waterfall is drinkable. I see clients in whom I have my own private practice based in Sacks Creek, and my clients and I sit beside the billabong. We do it bare feet so that we're grounding ourselves as well. And the sound of the waterfall and just the whole environment is really soothing and nurturing for people, and they can't wait to come back. For people that have support dogs, they love coming, and the dog loves splashing around in the water as well, which is also really endearing for the client. And so it makes it a really enjoyable and warm and fuzzy feeling. So the experience I'd like to share with you, I used to work through the Royal Commission into institution-sponsored child sexual abuse. My role was to cover all communities, Indigenous communities, in Queensland and the Torres Strait. And most of my clients were older and had never ever told their story before. When you have childhood trauma, you don't have the vocabulary as a child, and that extends as an adult as well, which makes it really difficult to talk. So I always ask my clients to see me in a location that they're comfortable, and it is always somewhere outside where they feel comfortable, and we always use the elements of nature, and I use that as well to keep clients safe. So one uncle that I saw out at Charleville arranged to meet me at the local park, and there was a pond, there were geese, lots of other birds, there was wildlife. It was really beautiful. As we're talking, I'm documenting Uncle's story because it's the best way to do it so he's not having to relive the story again and again and again and re-traumatise himself. So while we're talking, he started to get a bit upset naturally, and he started to quietly sobbing, but he was still in a safe place. And I noticed that the geese in the pond all stopped and looked at us. So as he continues, I'm watching the geese, and then they all come around and surrounded us. And I said to Uncle, do you know these birds? And he said, no. And I said, well, they're really worried about you. Can you just let them know that you're okay when you can? He did, and they all went back to the pond. Can you imagine how Uncle felt knowing that he had just been surrounded with love by nature and looked after? Can you imagine that yourself? How amazing is it when you see a dolphin or a whale and you know that you've been seen? Or the birds or the animals in your environment? Are you aware that every animal in your environment already knows you in the routine? So, the reason I've asked you to do some doodles, I have the ability to read what your painting is, your doodle is, and it tells me what's going on for you today at this very moment. I won't do it unless you ask me to, and I certainly won't do it publicly. But that's the skill that I have, and that's the skill that my mob has. And you just told me something about you and how things are going for you without saying a word. How amazing is that? How much better than sitting in a room feeling uncomfortable? So if this interests you, or if you know of anybody that would benefit from this kind of therapy, I have lots of business cards there. Please contact me. And if you say BX, I'll give you a discount. All right. Thanks very much for your time.
Great.